Okay, it's time to get started. I'll start by taking record. When I mispronounce your name, please correct me. And if I say it right, just say here. So, and a lot of these people, since there's not many of you, I've already figured out, but Hannah Ashburn and Maxwell Brummy. Yes. And you goes Maxwell or Max?
Max.
Max, okay. Daniel Hauk.
Yes.
Hauk. Latifer James. Latifer. Okay. I'm pretty sure you go as Yeri, but Lilis Jimenez.
It's Yari.
Yari?
Yes.
Okay, Yari. Okay, Gabriela Mendoza.
Yeah.
Gabby. And Aldwin Montague.
Yeah, Alvin.
How you say it?
Alvin.
Alwyn? Okay. And Tioni. And Amelia Ricewig. And Russell Robinson. And Connor White. Okay. Anyone that I didn't call? Oh, I think that's everything. Okay, good. We will start by going over the class, just basically how it operates, and then we should get some astronomy today. So that's not what I was supposed to do. I'm supposed to just change pages like that. Okay, so first going through the syllabus, which I made sure you all had. It starts off with simple things like when we meet. We have lecture. Oh, that wasn't supposed to happen either. I think my hand must have caused that. I can undo. Nope. Must be something with how the... Okay, I'm going to try it one last time and just let it ride. Okay, let it ride. So we have lecture here at 2 to 3, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then we have lab 8 to 11 on Tuesdays, starting tomorrow. So we're going to meet for lab tomorrow, Tuesday. And notice that it's always going to meet here in Kruger Center. Now, if it's clear after the time, after a month or so, we will almost immediately leave here to go to view the sky. But especially for the first month, we're always going to have a little bit of lecture because we have to wait for the sky to get dark. Right? You just can't see stars when it's not dark out. So for the first month, we'll start with about an hour lecture. So make sure you come ready to do whatever you do during lecture. And then after that lecture portion, then I go out to Holmes Lake for two good reasons. Number one, it's right next to my home. And number two, it's much darker there than it is here. And because it's darker, you can see things that you just can't see here on campus. We will try to at least once go out to, now when we're going to Holmes Lake, we're just going to be on the dam right there at the corner. We're not going to the observatory that's on the other side. But we'll try to at least once go out to Gary, can't remember his last name. Well, Gary's house. He lives out in the country, so it's dark and we'll be able to see things much better. We'll get out the telescope and see what we can see out there. Okay. Yes, the whole page. Okay, we've seen what I need to highlight. Let's undo all that. The objectives for this course are important things. One of the biggest objectives I have for this course is that you understand what the scientific method is. So you see that first one, understand and be able to apply the scientific method. The scientific method is the method by which we learn in science. And so when people talk about, well, it's a scientific this or that, they're talking about information that was learned using that method. So we're going to try to be very specific in learning about that scientific method and being able to use it. And so I'm going to do things like give you a scenario and have you try to draw the implications you can from it. Try to use the scientific method. You'll have to memorize a little simple version of it. But you see those first two things are very much on the scientific method idea. The third one, understand how science benefits society. A lot of people think, especially in the realm of astronomy, I mean, what good is it doing us here on Earth that we send astronauts out and they live in the International Space Station and whatnot? And so I actually have a couple links for the kinds of things that have been found through the space program. A lot of them are basic science that has been discovered as they develop stuff for that, which would answer the question, what's the use of spending a lot of money for novel ideas, but not necessarily about astronomy per se. But some things, like they've been able to make alloys in space that you simply can't make on Earth because of the different gravitation. So we want to learn a little bit about what's useful about scientific knowledge, especially in astronomy. And then there's some basic things like astronomy. It's really important to me that everybody knows at least what the 8 planets in our solar system are and some basic things about those planets. So that's another thing I'm going to be trying to work on testing, and that you can go out and impress a young man or young lady, depending on the situation, with your knowledge about looking at the sky and saying, oh, look, there is Cassiopeia. Why, she was the queen of Ethiopia. And see, there's her husband Cepheus next to her. And their daughter Andromeda that they tied to the rocks. And Perseus came by. I want you to have some knowledge about that, be able to identify the pictures and identify some of the stories to go with them. And that's the kind of thing we're going to be working on in lab. The last one, recognize how air and light pollution generated by humans affects astronomy. We like to go out and see the sky, but I said we have to really go out away from here to really see the sky. Here on campus, there's just too much light. We can't see much of anything. You go out to Holmes Lake, it's darker and you can see enough. You go out into the countryside, which is basically anywhere in Nebraska that's not named Omaha or Lincoln, and you can see a whole lot more. And so we're going to spend some time, we'll watch a Simpsons episode to really drive this point home about the importance of trying to have a clear sky. Now, as many of you have found out, there's a prerequisite here of being able to do some math. Now, this is not a highly math-intensive course, but it still uses some math. And so from time to time, people get frustrated that they're having a hard time with the math. So you can get a B in the class without doing any math, but you pretty much can't get an A without doing any math. You have to do some math to get that A. Now, classroom decorum, try to pay attention and, don't make a scene. Don't sit there and spend the whole class period texting away to your friends. There's one other thing. Only one person is in violation of this rule, but this building has a rule that's very simple. If you're at a black table, you can't have anything that's food or drink. The reason for that rule is because in something like a biology lab, right, these black tables go to the libraries. In a biology lab, you've got nasty things and you don't want to ingest those. And so you don't want to have things that you might be sticking in your mouth around that stuff. Now this classroom, we don't have very much of the dangerous stuff, but because it's a building-wide policy, I hope that you would, in the future, obviously you didn't know, but in the future, adhere to the building policy on that. Accommodations, if you have a learning difference or handicap of any kind, that's something that you work it out with the TLC. They tell me what accommodations I need to do, and I do whatever they tell me to do. So you start with the TLC as far as what accommodations you need. Academic integrity. How many people have had a teacher show them the academic integrity sheet or summary for students? Raise their hands. Okay, most of you. We developed a policy, I think we adopted it, about academic integrity, just about cheating. And of course, everybody knows you shouldn't cheat, right? That's bad form. But what's not so clear is, well, what's cheating? You're going to have homework assignments. I don't think I have one scheduled for Monday, or Wednesday, 2 days from now. But generally, you'll have homework assignment every Wednesday. I think that's what I have planned. I have to look back at the syllabus what you're looking at. And those homework assignments, of course, you can have problems for you to solve. And if you don't know how to solve it, well, what's the best thing to do or what's the easiest thing to do? The best thing to do is to find a friend in the class and say, I couldn't figure this one out. Can you help me? And then discuss it together so that you learn it and then you can answer it on your own. The worst thing to do is to say, Yahoo or answers.yahoo.com. Type in the question, find an answer, and say, I'm just going to copy this. Well, I don't know anything. Right? That's the problem is you don't learn when you do that. And so what's acceptable and what's not, I encourage you to work with classmates to learn from them, not to copy them. It's academically dishonest to say, oh yeah, I got that here. Read this and give them your solution. And it's of course academically dishonest to say, oh gee, thanks, and copy it down. But if the two of you are working together, one person explains the other, that's perfectly legitimate. So I want to make sure that kind of distinction is clear. Other obvious things like we're going to be using clickers in class periodically. I will ask a question, you'll put an answer on the clicker, and then we'll go over maybe discussing the answers and whatnot. But let's say that Russell, because Russell's in the front row, let's say that Russell, like, oh man, I really got to go to the bathroom. I need to go to the bathroom before class. Got to go. He goes to the bathroom, and then a clicker question comes up. Right? They're already in the presentation. It's not like I'm planning one for when Russell leaves the room. But
Hannah.
Ms. Ashford is sitting there. She's like, well, that's not fair, Russell. I mean, he was here the whole time, and then he leaves, and he doesn't get the answer. And so she just reaches over and says, there, put an answer for him. That's academically dishonest, right? It's supposed to be his participation. If he's gone, he's not participating, right? Now, I mean, going to the bathroom is a legit thing, but you need to, only put in answers on your clicker when you're here. Something I should point out, with the new clicker system, if you use your cell phone for the clicker, you could be in your dorm room. If you have the software running, it'll pop up and say, well, here's the question. You can put in the answer. But if you're not here in the classroom, I'm not going to give you credit for it. Okay, so don't say, hey, I'm just going to take my phone with me everywhere. I'll answer no matter what. I mean, you could do that, but you won't get credit for it because you do need to be here in the class participating. Obviously, don't cheat on tests. If I had a problem with this, so I just made a simple rule. If anyone has a cell phone at their desk when they're taking a test and I find out, doesn't matter if it's turned off or anything. If there's a cell phone there, you're going to get a 0 on the test. Right? So it's just a simple rule. Don't have the cell phone there. And I'll ask you before the test, make sure you don't have your cell phone. So it's not like you can say, oh, I forgot. But it's just make sure there's no question, because case that happened a few years back, probably 3 or 4 years. Guy sitting here with the cell phone in his lap. My TA, I actually was out of the room. My TA saw him, came over, got the cell phone, had him turn it on, and what was there? Oh, he had taken a picture of the screen or the board during one of my lectures, and he was looking at that picture of the board, trying to figure out the answer. You can't really tell, so we just don't have them with you, then we can know. You weren't cheating on it. Okay. I'm not going to go over the academic integrity policy. You can read through that, and it's just telling you how Union College is going to deal with situations where there is a suspicion that there has been academic integrity violations. By the way, if at any point you have a question, just blurt it out. Raising your hand is good and nice, and I try to respond, but if I'm not looking in the right place, I just stand. Okay, things that are going to be points for this class, how your grade is going to be determined. First, there is that clicker participation. Now, the clicker participation has 2 things. Number 1, whenever I ask a clicker question, I want you to thoughtfully consider and put in your best answer. I'm not going to grade on if you're right or wrong on that answer. I'm using if you're right or wrong to assess my teaching, but not to affect your grade. So I want you to put in your best answer, and you'll get credit for participation. You have to answer in each class period 60% of the questions. So if there are 3 or more questions, you could miss one. You could be in the bathroom if there are 3 questions and it didn't hurt you. If there are only 2 questions, it would hurt you. That's the first part. The second part is I will make little flashcards with each person's name, and after some questions, I will flip over the top card and say, Tioni, can you explain your answer? And then Tioni, of course, will be on the spot to explain the answer, and then I will give him a grade on the quality of his explanation. Even if he's wrong, he can have a good quality explanation, right? But by that point, there should have been enough information to have a good chance of being right. And so those two things are what's going to go together to get 5% of your grade, the participation rate, participation. Next one, another 5% is group presentations. Before each exam, we have 3 exams. We'll have a review and lab, but we'll also have the class period before the exam, a presentation covering the chapters, the material that's going to be on that test by students. So I am sure I have a date somewhere, but I want students to either self-form groups. If you count up, it'd be 1 group of 3 and 2 groups of 4, I think it comes out to be. So form a group and choose which one of the 3 exams you want to give the review on. And then for your review, it's going to be graded by both me, 50% of grade, and the rest of your classmates, the other 50% of grade. Not exactly democracy. It's going to be based on things like how interesting it is, how accurate it is, that kind of thing. So just saying, okay, chapter 5 is covering this, and make sure you know this, this, and this, and this. You have a teacher that can drone on and on, saying, make sure you know this, this, and this. Right? The goal is to make it something interesting that's actually going to help people be prepared more than just the reviews that I did. So that's 5%. It's a 1 group grade unless somebody doesn't participate. Like, let's say, okay, I'm just going to use it, let's say Jim Bob is in the group, and when they do the presentation, Jim Bob's just sitting over here and doesn't say a word, Jim Bob won't get his score. And the other people will get the score, right? Because you do have to participate. You have to be part of the presentation, not just part of the plan. Okay, another 5% quizzes. Periodically, last year I only gave 5 quizzes. I always try to give at least 10. Like 1 every week and a half on average. But I always have a hard time remembering to do quizzes. But there will be quizzes periodically. They're not announced. Why are they not announced? Because I want you to be always ready, to always know what we've been discussing in the last few lectures. So the quizzes will cover material from essentially the last 3 lectures before. The quizzes are usually at the beginning of class, so starting right at 2 and going for 5 minutes. So they're not announced. Come take them. You'll get 1 drop quiz, but if we get more than 7, I'll give you a second drop quiz. Right? I want to get more quizzes, but it doesn't make sense to drop 2 quizzes if you only have 5 quizzes, right? You drop 40% of them. Okay, the last of the 5%ers homework. No, not homework. Flip Friday. That's a mistake. Well, it's not exactly a mistake. Okay, I'm not even with the pin I wanted anymore. Undo. Okay, the Flip Friday. Last year I tried every Friday to do a flipped classroom type thing. And in this class it worked out a little better than my other class, but it wasn't overly popular with the students. And so I will try these occasionally. And so it's only 5% of your grade, but some class periods I'll tell you on Wednesday, okay, here's a handout that you need to fill out before coming to class on Friday. And Friday you're going to be working in groups on another handout that uses the information that was on the first one plus other knowledge. And then you'll be working as groups, and I will be here as a facilitator, somebody to ask questions, and then I will, try to. I have to say this because last year I got hammered on this in teacher evaluations. When I was in college taking my education classes, they told us never give the student the answer. Always ask the student questions to probe their knowledge and help them guide them to the answer. Students really didn't like it. They thought it was demeaning, and I felt really bad looking at my teacher evaluations. It's what I was taught was the right way to help students learn. But anyway, I tried to help you and not make you feel bad or like you don't know. And so that's what the Flip Fridays are. Then to the 10% homework. Homework assignment, essentially every Wednesday, I believe. I'm looking at the schedule to make sure I'm right. Yeah, pretty much every Wednesday except for a few times. And those homework assignments will be posted on Moodle. The first one's not posted yet because, hey, it's the first day of school. But I'll post them on Moodle. I'll actually have the questions there so you could actually just take the Moodle page and you have all the questions written out. when you turn it in, if you turn it in on a physical piece of paper, you need to turn it in to my office by 5 p.m. on the day that's shown. So on the Wednesday where it's shown as due. But if you want to turn it as a PDF, so you could use like one of the copy machines on campus and just scan it to PDF and email it to yourself, you can then upload the PDF on Moodle, and you can do that anytime up until 11:55 p.m. So you have more time for the PDF version. Why? Because, well, the computer tracks when it's turned in, and it can make sure of everything. If I'm not in my office, how do I know? It could be, 6 a.m. when you turned it in. I don't want people staying up late working on homework. The honest truth. Okay, laboratory. The laboratory is pretty separate from the class, really. Now, we will be having a lecture for the first month or so, but the laboratory is going to be focused on observing the sky. When it's not clear, we'll have to do some activities in here, but our focus there is on observing the sky. A lot of students, when they take astronomy, that's what they think the whole class is. They look it up and say, ooh, look at the pretty stars. And that's an important part of astronomy, but that's the part that we're doing in lab. In class, we're going to be learning about how stars develop, live their lives, die, and those kinds of things. So we're learning a lot more than just how to look at stars in the classroom. But in the laboratory, it's mostly about just looking at the stars. Midterm exam, I said there's 3 midterm exams, each one equally weighted, so 10% each, and then a final exam that's 15%. Attendance is a special thing. You notice I took attendance here. Everybody was on time. Union College allows, or at least they did allow, this was written at some point, 3 excused absences for college things. And so I figure, okay, I am never going to sit here and say, ooh, that's excused. No, that's not excused. So I just say, your first 3 absences, for whatever reason, I will consider excused. And if you have perfect attendance, which then is defined as those 3 absences were excused and didn't count, then I give you a 2% bonus to your grade, which is a pretty big bonus. But you have to have that, that line. So how I calculate it is, if you're here on time to start a class, and if you're not sitting there texting throughout class, or you don't, I've had students do this, you don't get up and go to the cafeteria and buy yourself some food and come back, 15 minutes later to finish up the class. If you're here and attentive throughout class, you'll get 3 points. If you show up late, but within the first 5 minutes of class and behave appropriately in class, you'll get 2 points. If you show up more than 5 minutes late, or if you're sitting there texting your friends in class, or if you leave for an extended period of time, then you just get 1 point. And of course, if you're absent, you get 0. 3 classes would be 3 points per class. If you lose 9 points or less, then you get the bonus. If you lose more than that, you don't get the bonus. So that's, it's my one and only effort-based grade. Everything else is outcome-based, but that one's just effort. Did you try? Okay, now some specifics. The clickers. How many people have a clicker? Okay. How many people have a smartphone? Okay, everybody has a smartphone, I believe. You can now use your smartphone as your clicker. And it actually works better because the smartphone, like I said, it will tell you what the question is. And then you can put your answer in there and it gives you results in the whole 9 yards. So the new thing with the clickers is it doesn't matter if you have the physical clicker, which more than half of you had, in fact, almost everybody had, or if you use your smartphone. It's the same about $21 that you have to pay. And that's a license for the full year. But they're going to give you a rebate for that fee for this year. So what you're going to have to do is, if you haven't done this already, you only have to do this once. You don't have to do it for every Moodle class, or for every clicker, for every class that uses clickers. But if you go to Moodle, and this is the wrong class, I should have almost all of you in the class already. I'll take care of the last, I think, 2 after class, assuming the one person hadn't created an account when I did it. So if you go to Moodle, you have this turning account registration. So you're going to have to click there, and I actually have in your syllabus the instructions on what to do there. but you will have to go through and you'll have to pay about $21 to get a license. And then you'll have to register. You can register both your telephone, your smartphone, and your clicker, just to, if you have one and not the other, you can use either one. So you register those, and then you come down and you click this one here to get the rebate instructions so that you can get your money back. Right? So you have to pay the money, but you're going to get it back assuming you follow through. You only have 90 days to follow through, so don't say, I'll do that at the end of the semester. Do it the same time you pay. So that way, at least this year, you don't lose the money. It at least gets one more class out of the way where people spent good money on a clicker, and all of a sudden, wait, I have to pay a fee whether I bought one or whether I just used my smartphone. So that's the registration of the clickers. While I'm here on Moodle, let's look at some other things on Moodle. You can see here, if you lose the syllabus, there's the syllabus right there. If you're wondering what's due when, there's the schedule. There's also a calendar up here. I haven't put any things in the homework, so there's nothing that shows up. But when I do, you'll see up here when things are due on the calendar, and there'll also be upcoming events that shows you when things are due as well. So you can look there for when things are due. Other resources that you might be interested in are things like, that's last year's groups there. Here I have a number of useful sites, things like how to pronounce constellation names, in case you're wondering if it's booties or booties. That tells you it's booties. So you can look there, you can see pretty pictures of the Northern Lights, whatever. There's all kinds of fun things here. Some of them that I really like, if you ever want to know, like, hey, when's a satellite going to pass above that I might be able to see? Heavens Above will tell you when satellites are passing above. So you can figure out, at this point in time, there should be the International Space Station passing overhead, and it'll have an apparent visual magnitude of -3. That's super bright, so I can go out and see that, and it'll be super bright, and it'll be very cool. Space weather is good for telling you, like, are there going to be a chance of northern lights? We get some northern lights here, not very much because we're fairly far south. So there's some cool things there just to enjoy. Notice that I have here the latitude and longitude for Union College, so you can use an app on your smartphone or your tablet. Apps that I have here, the Star Walk, there's an iPad and an iPhone, separate applications that both cost $3. That's a really good one if you have an iPhone. If you have an Android phone, then just get the free one, Google Sky Map. Those will use the GPS in your device to know the position, but if you have something else that you need to put the position in, that's the coordinates. Also, I'm recording this lecture. If you want to hear and see these slides here, or whatever is on my screen, you can go to lecture recordings and it will take you to YouTube. I'm not sure if I've set it up yet, but I will. And you can review the lectures there. You can listen to them, jump to, 27th minute, whatever. Show your friends, here's when my teacher really screwed up and said something ridiculous. Also, the lecture slides, the actual PowerPoint slides that I use, you can view those at the link there for completed lecture slides. Once again, I may not have those linked up yet, but I will. These here where it says lecture presentations, those are presentations I gave a few years back. They still are probably representative, but they're not the same presentation that I gave this year. The ones I gave this year up there in the completed lecture slide ones. But these, you have the entire semester's worth already there from previous year. And I will put in homework and quiz things as they're appropriate for each chapter. So they're broken up actually in a unit by unit. So unit 1 is, unit what? Is it parts? Yeah. Part 1 is units 1 through 13. The units are pretty small. Part 2 is units, 14 to 32 or something like that. And so it's broken up by the units there. Down at the bottom, I have stuff about the lab final. We have in this class, of course, a final in the class, but we also have a lab final. And the lab final, well, I'll bring it up here. The lab final requires you to be able to point to and name 10 stars. And to be able to show the basic outline of and name 15 constellations and or asterisms. And then you have to also identify, I'll roll this up a little, 5 specific things. The brightest star in the sky, which for most of the semester is going to be Vega. At the very end of the semester, if you do it late at night, it will be Sirius, the dog star. Have to find the Andromeda Galaxy. The Andromeda Galaxy, you have to go somewhere dark to see the Andromeda Galaxy. But if it's dark, you actually can't see it with the naked eye. And so we'll learn how to find it, and you'll have to be able to point to its location even if you can't see it at that moment. You'll have to be able to identify the Pleiades and a red giant and name it. So you have your stars. The red giant has to be a different one than the ones you have in your stars. Likewise, the bright stars has to be an additional one to the ones you have in your stars. So you say, okay, that is, well, Antares won't be available, but that's Betelgeuse, and it's a red giant. And finally, the equinoctial couleur, which is the meridian that marks it's the same as the prime meridian on Earth, but it's in the sky. And so you have to specifically be able to point out those things as well. So that's the lab final. Now, the first time I looked at this was lab final used by an astronomy professor at PUC before I started teaching astronomy. I just looked at it, I was like, well, that's asking a lot of the students, isn't it? Does it seem like it's asking a lot, or does it seem easy? At first, I thought it was asking a lot, but what you'll find is after 2 or 3 nights out there, probably half of you will be able to do it already. But I don't allow you to do it until after time changes. The reason we can't do it until after time changes is because the Pleiades isn't going to be visible until then in our night sky. Now, along with this, I want to make sure people get through and get it done, and hopefully not on paper. If it's not clear and you can't see stars, you can't go out and point things out. And so if we get to the last lab of the year and you haven't done your lab final, then you'll have to do it on a piece of paper if it's not clear. And it's harder to identify on paper, so I don't want people to have to do that. So once we can start doing it, I encourage you to do it as early as possible. Also, it won't be as cold if you do it earlier than if you do it later. And if you have completed the lab final by the last 2 lab periods, then you don't have to come to the last 2 lab periods. That is also the only way to make up a lab. If you miss a lab, make sure that you get the STAR quiz done before the last 2 labs, and then you can come and act as a teaching assistant during one of the last 2 labs, pointing things out to other students and get credit back for the missed lab. You had a question?
Yes. So, am I understanding this correctly, that after the time changes, we can do the lab final anytime we want when we know the material?
Yes.
Wait till the end of the semester.
Yes, and I encourage you not to wait to the end of the semester. Now, you'll still have to keep coming until the last 2 weeks. So if you do it, the first time it's possible, you still have to come for the next 2 or 3 labs, but then you don't have to come for the last 2. That's so the last 2, all we're going to do is be giving the lab final. Any other questions about it? Okay, going back to the presentation. So we went there by talking about registering the clickers. So before class on Wednesday, make sure you've gone through and registered your clicker or your smartphone, whatever you're going to use, because I'm going to be asking clicker questions, and I will be then starting my grading on participation. So make sure you do it between now and Wednesday. Group presentation I've already talked about. I have here the time when you have to have your group set by this Friday. If you don't have your group set by this Friday, that's fine. I'll just assign groups. If you choose your group, it's first come, first served on which test you want to do. So if you put your group together, like I know I saw the people at the back table say, then you can come say, hey, can we be the people who do this one? First come, first serve. So yeah. All right. I already talked about the quizzes, the Flip Friday. the homework, the laboratory. Yeah, pretty much covered all that. Here's the minimum grades for each, or percentages for each grade. I do round. So when it says, 70%, if you get a 69.5, I will round that up. If you get a 69.44, I'm not going to round that up. So it needs to be, 69 point, above 69.4999999 for me to round up. Finally, course assessment. The course assessment is how I'm going to assess how well I did teaching. And so you have a document, and actually let me go to that document. Okay, I didn't put the document in here, darn it. Okay, you have a document in your syllabus about course assessment. And it's kind of important to pay attention to that simply because it can help you plan. So you see here, my first criteria, understand and be able to apply the scientific method. If you look in the next to last column, you're going to have a question on the first exam and on the final exam that's going to test that for my assessment. And then you can look at capstone 4 through benchmark 1. Those are telling you the things I'm looking for. The capstone 4 means you hit everything I was looking for. Benchmark 1 means, well, you got a star. So you can see first and final exam have something on the scientific method. The third midterm exam will be asking you to draw conclusions from scientific data. The final exam will have you answer a question showing that you understand how scientific knowledge benefits humanity. The second exam, as well as, second exam, will be asking you to name the planets in order from the sun out, and then you'll have to know some fact about the planets. And I'm going to tell you what the fact is, like, atmosphere. Does it have an atmosphere? If so, how thick? Or moons. Does it have moons? If so, how many? So I'll have some kind of facts like that you'll have to identify, along with knowing the names of the planets in order. The next one on the lab final, you'll be asked to recognize these things I've already gone over. It's very clear what that is. And the final one, recognize how air and light pollution is generated by light pollution. You'll have both an essay on the first exam as well as a lab on light pollution. So you can see how I'm going to assess some things so you know what some questions are going to be about coming up. So that's an important thing just to pay attention to, so you know things that are coming down the pipe. Those are things that are really important to me that you learn in the class. Okay, skip that. This here is the schedule of everything we're going to do in class. So you can see today, August 22, we're doing units 1 through 4, the scope of astronomy. I have 20 minutes, 10 minutes, to talk about the scope of astronomy. We might not get it all done. That's okay. I'll just add it into that unit 13 that I'm going to do tomorrow night during lab. We'll get it done in time. And then you can see that we should be lecturing on observing the sky, which is unit 13 in lab tomorrow night. And then when we go out, we'll be just doing basic stargazing, learning the basics of what we're doing when we're stargazing. And you can go on, you can see homework assignment 1 will be due on August 31. And you see everything when it comes up, when it's due. So there should be no questions on, is something due? It's all right here. The only thing that's not here is the Flip Fridays, which will be coming up occasionally, but not every week. And I haven't decided which ones to do. Any questions about the schedule?
You said all the homework's on Moodle, right?
It will be. It's not yet.
Okay.
Anything else? All right. I'm assuming no one has a clicker that's already registered, right? Because you have to go through pain and whatnot. But if you had one, this would be a question I'd ask you. So I'm just going to have people blur it out. When and where is our next astronomy appointment? There we go. Lab at 8 p.m. Where are we going to meet? Here. And we're definitely going to have lecture, so bring whatever you need for a lecture. Then after it gets dark, we'll walk. If you have a car, you can drive. Ever since I got married, I've been driving to work. So I'll have my car and I'll drive out there. But it's an easy walk. You just walk down Prescott to the end, basically. It's about 2/3 of a mile. And we'll go out there and we'll observe the sky. Okay, now we get to astronomy. 10 minutes. So just look at this picture. You probably recognize pretty much everything in that picture, right? Where's Earth? There was a TV show, Third Rock from the Sun, because that's what Earth is. Things over here are rocky. Things over here are gassy. So the Earth is the third rock from the sun. Over here is the, messed that one up. Over here is the sun, and so that's Earth right there. And I'm guessing a lot of you already know that it's Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. That there, of course, not a planet anymore. It used to be considered a planet, Pluto, and we'll learn about that later on, why it got demoted. For very good reasons.
Some people still consider it a planet, though.
Well, there was obviously heated debate because some people really wanted it to be a planet. Some people said it doesn't fit. It doesn't have any characteristics of a planet. And so what they came up with was, number one, a definition of planet that was devised so it would clearly exclude Pluto. So it can't be considered a planet. But then a secondary definition of what they call a dwarf planet. So it was a new category, a dwarf planet. And that dwarf planet category has like 5 things in it: Ceres, Pluto, Eris, Hawaii, I think Hawaii is the last one? I don't know. There are 5 recognized dwarf planets. And so some people say, well, it's a dwarf planet, doesn't mean it's still a planet. And so that's where you get people say, well, it's still a planet because it's just a dwarf planet. Other people say, yeah, they made up the category dwarf planet so Pluto wouldn't be lost in the shuffle. Okay, so scientific enterprise. How scientists do things. You've probably heard statements like, I think it was Newton, Einstein, talking about all of his discoveries were made possible because he stood on the heads of giants. That people before him had learned a lot, and he took that knowledge and he advanced it further. And so his discoveries weren't super amazing. They were just continuing the scientific inquiry of everyone before. Science is very much a process of building knowledge. And so scientific explanations, always you start by looking at previous ideas. And then you come up with your own idea of how something works, and then you test your new idea. And so I'm going to jump to the scientific method here. This you will have to have memorized. You will have to replicate this pretty much exactly on that first and final exam. So the first step in the scientific process is really simple. Observe something interesting. Science is about inquiry. It's about having a mind that says, why does that happen? And so you notice something like, let's take retrograde motion. If you look at a planet, every night that planet moves just a little bit in the sky compared to the stars. But then there are some periods where the planets start going the opposite direction. They might do that for a month or two, and then they reverse and go the same direction they started. And so why would they reverse direction? That doesn't seem to make sense. And so you notice something that's really interesting, that the planets seem to reverse their direction of motion with respect to the stars. And then you say, okay, I think this must be. A hypothesis can be considered an educated guess. It's not just straight throwing darts. You're starting with the ideas of people before you, using them to make a guess as to why you think it might be. And so Ptolemy said, well, maybe the planets aren't orbiting right around the Earth. They're orbiting a little bit offset from Earth, and the planets are doing little circles on their big circles. So that was his hypothesis. Copernicus, on the other hand, said that all the planets are going around the sun, and The Earth is also going around the sun. I did not want those things to show up. I've got to figure out how to make that not happen. And because the Earth is going around the sun, you get periods of time when the Earth is going around and the angle per time is bigger than the angle per time for the other one, and it seems to go backward. Those are both hypotheses. So the hypothesis needs to explain why the interesting thing occurred. It needs to be based on scientific ideas, and it needs to make predictions that you can test. If your hypothesis doesn't make testable predictions, it's not worthwhile because we can't determine if it's wrong. If it makes testable predictions, then we can test and see, did that prediction come true? If it did, we'll have more confidence. If it didn't, we'll know it was wrong. So you have those three things for the hypothesis. The next step is develop a test that can test a prediction of the hypothesis and do it. And the final step is, if it passes the test, you feel more confident, but you're not done. You go back and you find another test of another prediction. If it fails the test, well, then you know it was wrong. So then you go back and you have more information. You know more of what it's not. And so you revise your hypothesis to include your new information. So you have developed a stronger understanding because you know what it's not. Question, Max?
Yes. So if the hypothesis passes the test, you go back to step 3 and run a similar but different test to reinforce the idea that it's true?
It doesn't have to be similar. It can be very different.
Okay.
But another test of a prediction of the hypothesis.
You're testing the same hypothesis or a different?
The same hypothesis, but not necessarily the same prediction of the hypothesis.
Okay.
Right? A hypothesis will usually have a plethora of things it predicts.
Okay.
Now, when you get out of this process, if it passes the test, you go back and test the new way. If it fails the test, you go back and make a new hypothesis. When you get out of this process, you never get out. The scientific method is never done. There is no such thing as a proven scientific fact. People will say that, but it's not true. Now, if you've done it enough times, you start to really get some confidence, and we start saying, that it's a theory, not just a hypothesis. It's not an early theory, it's now a full-on theory. And if you test it enough and you really develop a strong belief in it, if it's, you might call it a principle, you might call it a law, we have some advanced names, but a law doesn't mean it's true. Newton's law of, Newton's second law. You push on something, the acceleration is proportional to the force that pushed it, to that force. That's a law, and it's something that I believe. But one experiment can prove it wrong. It's not something that we say, that's a fact, Jack. It's just, we believe it really strongly. And, I'm a creationist. I believe that God created the heavens and the earth, not in the way some people do, but some people like me who are creationists say, oh, evolutionary theory, it's just a theory. But we've got the fact here. But in science, a theory is as strong as you can get. It doesn't mean it's weak because it has the name theory. Now, I do think that there are things in it that make it weak. There are things in it that aren't weak, but there are things that I think are weak. But just don't think because it's a theory, it's weak. Okay, I've got 2 minutes. What's the answer here? When is the scientific method done? Never, right. It is never completed. So, a model. A model is the only thing that's new on this. A model in science is an analogy. So a simple analogy is we look up at the stars and we see the stars in fixed positions with respect to each other. That is, the Little Dipper always looks like the Little Dipper. Right? The stars don't move around past each other as far as we can tell. Now, if you study them very carefully, you do see that they are moving with slightly different speeds. And over the course of a decade, it might have moved by a really, really tiny fraction that we can measure with telescopes and whatnot that you'd never be able to tell if we make it out. So, to all intents and purposes, all those stars are in the same position with respect to each other as viewed from Earth. And so we have a model that we call the celestial sphere
that says all of those stars are on a big sphere out there. So you've seen globe. The Earth is a sphere, right? Well, the celestial sphere is just like a globe. But it says all of the stars are placed somewhere on this celestial sphere. And then that celestial sphere, well, the Earth is rotating inside, but we treat it like that celestial sphere is rotating around so we can watch the stars move. We know that's not the way it is. But it's a good way of locating the positions of stars. So we use it. It's a model. It's an analogy. It's not the fact, but it helps us to talk and discuss things in an intelligent manner. Now, the celestial sphere, if you were back in the days of Aristotle, he thought it was a fact. He thought that that's really what was going on. We know it's not, but it's still a useful model. Okay, it's time to end class, so I will see you again tomorrow night right here at 8 p.m.